It was a damn cold afternoon in Melbourne, the kind of cold that makes you question all your life choices, like why the hell you ever thought moving to Australia meant eternal sunshine. The world's best tennis players had gathered for the first Grand Slam of the year, the Australian Open, a stage where legends were made, rivalries were ignited, and egos were either inflated to cosmic proportions or brutally crushed under the weight of reality. Carlos Alcaraz, the Spanish prodigy who had taken the tennis world by storm with his relentless energy, explosive shots, and the kind of composure that made you forget he was only 21, was at the center of it all. Fans and pundits alike had practically crowned him the heir to the throne, the next big thing after the holy trinity of Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic. But, as with all rising stars, not everyone in the locker room was sipping the same Kool-Aid. Enter Jannik Sinner, the Italian Iceman. Stoic, disciplined, and allergic to unnecessary drama, Sinner had been clashing with Alcaraz since their junior days. He was the kind of guy who let his racket do the talking, a silent assassin on the court, respected across the tour for his no-nonsense attitude. But that night, after effortlessly bulldozing his way through the fourth round in straight sets, he broke character. He grabbed the mic, metaphorically speaking, and dropped a quote that sent shockwaves through the tennis world. When asked about Alcaraz's growing dominance, Sinner didn't flinch. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, and he leaned into the mic, delivering his verdict with a kind of precision that made his backhand deadly. "Carlos is a great player," he said in his usual measured tone. "But I think people are getting carried away. His level isn't as untouchable as everyone seems to believe." Boom. Silence. The journalists took a collective deep breath, as if they'd just witnessed a sacrilegious act. Sinner wasn't known for stirring shit. If anything, he was the guy who avoided unnecessary controversy like it was a double fault on breakpoint. That's precisely why his words carried weight. He wasn't done. "I've played him multiple times. Sure, he's got incredible intensity and athleticism. But I don't think he's invincible. There are gaps in his game, things other players haven't exploited yet because they're too busy being overwhelmed by his reputation. But if you look closely, you'll see he's got weaknesses. If Twitter or X, whatever the hell it's called now, could explode, this would have been the nuclear trigger." The media ran with it like a pack of hungry wolves, dissecting every syllable of Sinner's statement. By the time Alcaraz walked onto the court for his own match that evening, the entire world had an opinion. The commentators analyzed it to death. The experts sat in their fancy studios debating whether Sinner was spitting facts or just salty as hell, and fans on social media had already picked their sides. Alcaraz, for his part, walked in looking as unbothered as a cat knocking shit off a table. He annihilated his opponent like it was a personal vendetta. His performance was a message, loud and clear. "Y'all really doubting me?" But the tension was thicker than a protein shake at a bodybuilder convention. Back in the players' lounge, the vibe was, let's just say, weird as hell. Sinner sat in a corner, scrolling through his phone, reading the endless storm of reactions. He expected backlash, but even he was a little stunned by the intensity. Some called him bitter. Others accused him of being jealous of Alcaraz's meteoric rise. But plenty of people were on his side, arguing that the sport needed this kind of honesty, that real rivalries couldn't exist without some brutal truth-telling. "Regretting it yet?" his coach asked, sitting beside him. Sinner shook his head. "Nope. That's what I believe. He's good, but he's not untouchable. People need to stop acting like he's already one of the all-time greats." Meanwhile, in Alcaraz's post-match press conference, the inevitable question came up. The Spanish sensation, known for his maturity beyond his years, handled it with the grace of a seasoned veteran. "Everyone is entitled to their opinion," he said with an easygoing smile. "Jannik is a fantastic player. I respect him a lot. If he sees weaknesses in my game, then it's up to me to work harder and improve. But at the end of the day, the court will decide." Smooth as hell. And yet, his response only fueled the fire. The media painted it as a battle of perspectives. the analytical, no BS Sinner versus the charismatic, electrifying Alcaraz. Their contrasting personalities and styles became the talk of the tournament. Fans debated non-stop. Every forum, every tweet, every comment section turned into a war zone. Analysts broke down every match, every stat, every little detail, trying to determine who had the upper hand. Then fate, with its impeccable sense of drama, delivered the ultimate plot twist. The tournament bracket lined up just right, and boom, Sinner and Alcaraz were set to face each other in the semi-finals. The hype? Insane. Tickets? Sold out in hours. The atmosphere at Melbourne Park? Absolutely electric. This was no longer just another match. This was personal. The night of the showdown, the stadium was packed to the rafters. The crowd was split down the middle, chants of Jannik, battling against Vamos, Carlos. The players walked onto the court, faces locked in steely focus. The weight of Sinner's criticism and Alcaraz's cool-headed response had set the stage for something far bigger than just a semi-final. It was a clash of ideologies, a fight for supremacy, a goddamn statement about the future of tennis. The first set? Absolute fire. Alcaraz came out swinging, his forehands looking like they were forged in the depths of a volcano. His footwork? Flawless. But Sinner wasn't backing down. Shot for shot, he matched him. Every point was a highlight reel, every rally a war of attrition. It was power versus precision, aggression versus calculation. And with every passing game, you could feel it, the storm brewing, the unspoken challenge between these two young titans. Sinner had called Alcaraz overrated. Alcaraz had chosen to let his game do the talking. And now, under the bright lights of Rod Laver Arena, it was time to settle this shit once and for all. If the first set had been a battle, the second was a goddamn war. Neither Alcaraz nor Sinner was backing down, and the intensity on the court had reached a level where even the commentators, usually full of hot takes and unnecessary stats, had gone silent, just watching, like everyone else, as two young titans tried to tear each other apart with nothing but rackets and sheer willpower. Every rally felt like a mini-epic, a tug-of-war of strategies, skill, and, let's be honest, sheer stubbornness. They pushed each other to the brink, neither willing to let go, neither willing to blink first. When it all came down to a tiebreak, the atmosphere in Rod Laver Arena was thick with tension, so thick you could have cut it with a dull-ass butter knife. And that's where Alcaraz thrived. The dude had ice in his veins. Under pressure, he found another gear, his body moving like a goddamn panther as he chased down impossible shots, sending winners flying past Sinner with a kind of reckless elegance that had the crowd on their feet. The tiebreak was his. But the match was far from over. By the time the third set rolled around, the war had turned into a goddamn marathon. The two of them were drained, their shirts soaked through with sweat, their legs slower, their breathing heavier. Yet, somehow, neither of them looked ready to surrender. Every point now felt monumental. Every shot, a battle in itself. The crowd had reached a level of engagement that bordered on religious fervor, cheering, gasping, holding their breath as the ball whizzed back and forth. Sinner's criticisms from earlier in the tournament seemed almost prophetic at times. Alcaraz's aggressive playstyle occasionally got the best of him, leading to unforced errors that left his team groaning in frustration. But at the same time, his sheer brilliance, his ability to pull off shots that had no right to exist, kept proving why so many believed he was the future of the sport. This wasn't just about winning. It was about proving a damn point. By the time the final game came around, you could practically feel the walls of the stadium shaking. The crowd was losing its collective mind. Then, like a scene ripped straight out of a sports movie, Alcaraz found himself in position for the finishing blow, a cross-court forehand so brutal, so precisely executed, that Sinner could do nothing but watch as the ball flew past him, slamming into the court like a fucking exclamation mark. Game. Set. Match. Rod Laver Arena erupted. The stands exploded in applause, people jumping to their feet, some screaming, others just shaking their heads at what they just witnessed. Alcaraz dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, fists clenched, his chest heaving as he let the weight of the moment crash over him. Across the net, Sinner exhaled slowly, dragging a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. His face was a mix of disappointment and respect. He'd given everything. He'd backed up his words with a fight that no one would soon forget. But tonight, it hadn't been enough. As they met at the net, their handshake was firm, but brief. Alcaraz locked eyes with him, a half-smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Thanks for pushing me," he said, his voice barely audible over the roaring crowd. Sinner gave a small nod, his lips curling into the slightest smirk. "You earned it," he replied. And just like that, the match was over, but the debate? That was just getting started. The tennis world went fucking nuclear. Within minutes, social media was flooded with reactions. Analysts and fans dissected every point, every statistic, every damn facial expression. The match was immediately labeled an instant classic, a defining moment in a rivalry that was far from finished. Sinner's earlier remarks, which had once seemed like a potential controversy, now had a different weight. They had added fuel to a fire that made the match even bigger than just tennis. Had he been wrong? Had he been right? Was Alcaraz really the next unstoppable force? The discussions went on and on and on. In the days that followed, both players reflected on the battle. Alcaraz, despite his victory, wasn't sitting back to bask in the glory. He took Sinner's words as a challenge, a reminder that there were still cracks to fix, weaknesses to eliminate. "I'll use this to get better," he told reporters, his determination palpable. Sinner, though clearly disappointed, found solace in the fact that he had stood his ground. "I said what I believed, and I fought like hell," he admitted. He hadn't walked away with the win, but he had made sure Alcaraz had to spill every last drop of sweat to beat him. Their rivalry? Oh, this shit was just getting started. As the tour moved on to the next tournament, one thing was painfully clear. Jannik Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz was now the must-watch showdown in tennis. And for the fans? That was the best damn thing that could have happened. That night at Rod Laver Arena, the energy had been unlike anything seen in years. Every single seat was filled, and the audience was collectively perched on the edge of their seats, as if sheer anticipation could somehow tip the scales one way or another. Even the usually chatty commentators had shut the hell up during key moments, knowing that no words could do justice to what was unfolding on the court. In Sinner's player box, his team sat motionless, their faces betraying little emotion. His coach, Riccardo Piatti, barely blinked, murmuring occasional instructions under his breath. On the court, Sinner himself was the definition of composure. His sharp, angular frame moving with calculated precision, his shots measured and deliberate. Every time Alcaraz unleashed one of his monstrous forehands, Sinner answered with a perfectly placed, ice-cold backhand that kept his opponent from fully dictating the rhythm. Alcaraz, on the other hand, was a walking explosion of energy. His body language was raw, animated, his movements electric. Every time he won a crucial point, his signature "Vamos" echoed through the stadium, triggering a ripple effect of cheers from his supporters. His coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero, was just as intense, leaping out of his seat after every successful play, shouting encouragement in rapid-fire Spanish. The contrast in styles was fascinating. Power versus precision, relentless aggression against tactical resilience. As the first set unfolded, the clash of ideologies became even more apparent. Alcaraz was hell-bent on overpowering his opponent, hammering deep, heavy topspin shots into Sinner's backhand, trying to break him down. But Sinner? The dude was a wall. A fucking wall. He absorbed the pressure, redirected the pace, and turned Alcaraz's own aggression against him. Rallies grew longer. The baseline exchanges became brutal wars of attrition. Both players were looking for cracks in each other's armor, testing limits with every point. At 4-4, Alcaraz stepped up to serve. The tension in the air was suffocating. His toss was high, his motion fluid, and his serve sliced through the air at over 200 kilometers per hour. Sinner barely got his return over the net, forcing Alcaraz to sprint forward at full speed. This was it. Another defining moment in a match that had already become the stuff of legend. The crowd was on the edge of their goddamn seats, eyes locked on the court, barely breathing. Alcaraz had just unleashed a brutal forehand, a shot designed to end the rally with authority. But Sinner, because of course he did, somehow got there. Not only did he get there, but he sent the ball back with an absurdly sharp angle that left Alcaraz stranded like a lost tourist in the outback. The stadium exploded. Cheers and gasps clashed in the air, half the crowd losing their minds over Sinner's brilliance, the other half groaning at Alcaraz's missed opportunity. And just like that, the first set reached its dramatic climax. Sinner, cool as ever, took the tie-break. No wild celebrations, no dramatic chest thumping. Just a single clenched fist raised toward his box, a silent but deadly statement. On the other side of the net, Alcaraz stared at the ground, jaw tight, fists clenched. Frustration was creeping in, but panic? Hell no. If anything, the loss of that set seemed to fuel him. The fire in his eyes was unmistakable as he walked back to his chair, shaking his head like a man plotting his comeback. And that's exactly what he set out to do. The second set started with a bang. If the first set had been high intensity, this one was a full-blown war zone. Alcaraz, determined to flip the script, came out swinging. He played with a level of aggression that was borderline reckless, painting the lines with his forehand, his signature grunts growing louder with each shot. But Sinner? The guy wasn't taking the bait. He refused to be sucked into Alcaraz's chaos. He stuck to his game plan, kept his composure, and moved across the court like a damn machine. Every step, every shot, every decision, calculated to perfection. It was the ultimate battle between raw power and clinical precision. Midway through the set, the match reached a critical moment. 3-3. Alcaraz serving. The rally that followed was the kind of exchange that made highlight reels look like child's play. It was less of a rally and more of a goddamn endurance test. The ball zipped back and forth, both players hitting with ridiculous pace, both refusing to break first. The crowd, already at peak intensity, fell into an awestruck hush, watching in disbelief as these two maniacs refused to miss. Desperate to put an end to the madness, Alcaraz finally went for it, a blistering down-the-line forehand that should have been a clean winner. Should have. But Sinner had other plans. Like a ghost, the Italian appeared out of nowhere, sprinting across the baseline to reach the ball, then somehow, firing a counterattack that smacked the far corner with pinpoint accuracy. Alcaraz dived, stretching his racket as far as it could go, barely making contact. But his shot floated wide. And then, boom. The crowd exploded in a standing ovation, acknowledging not just the brilliance of Sinner's shot, but the sheer insanity of the rally they had just witnessed. At this point, the tension between the two was visible in every move they made. Alcaraz, usually all smiles and youthful charm, had the expression of a man ready to burn the whole damn place down. His eyes blazed with intensity. On the other side, Sinner was a goddamn fortress, face unreadable, body language locked in. But the cracks were there. When a controversial line call went in Alcaraz's favor, Sinner turned to the umpire, disbelief flashing across his face. Alcaraz, catching the reaction, allowed himself the tiniest smirk. That smirk? That smug little lift of the lips? Oh, it did something to Sinner. His eyes darkened. His jaw clenched. That fire in him, usually so well contained, was suddenly on full display. The second set reached its inevitable breaking point. Another tie-break. If the first one had been intense, this one was outright suffocating. Every single point felt like life or death. The stadium was a pressure cooker, and these two were playing like the entire damn championship was on the line. But Alcaraz had learned from his earlier mistakes. He didn't rush. He didn't swing wildly. He played with the perfect mix of caution and aggression, constructing points like a chess master instead of trying to end them in one blow. Still, Sinner refused to fold. His consistency forced Alcaraz into riskier shots, some of which paid off, some of which absolutely did not. 6-5. Set point for Sinner. Alcaraz stepped up to serve. The rally that followed? God tier. The ball flew across the court with terrifying speed. Each shot was harder than the last. Neither player was willing to blink first. And then Sinner struck. He stepped inside the baseline, took control, and unleashed a down-the-line backhand that left Alcaraz scrambling. The ball clipped the edge of the line, just barely in. The umpire's call confirmed it. Set to Sinner. And for the first time all night, the Italian let loose. Both arms shot up in victory, his face breaking into something between relief and triumph. His box erupted. His team knew how massive it was to go up 2 sets against a monster like Alcaraz. But even in their celebration, there was an underlying tension. Because they knew Alcaraz wasn't the type to roll over and die. On the other side of the net, the Spaniard sat in his chair, towel draped over his head, chest rising and falling in deep, controlled breaths. His team leaned in, offering encouragement. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. This shit wasn't over. The break between sets gave the players a brief physical reprieve, but the tension in the stadium remained at full volume. Fans argued heatedly in the stands. Some marveled at Sinner's tactical brilliance. Others rallied behind Alcaraz's unbreakable fighting spirit. The commentators, unable to resist the drama, jumped into the debate. This is as much a mental war as it is a physical one of them noted. Sinner has done an excellent job exposing Alcaraz's impatience. But you can't count him out, another chimed in. Carlos thrives in moments like this. Absolutely. But you have to wonder, are Sinner's comments from earlier in the week playing a role here? Is he inside Carlos' head, whether he admits it or not? And they were right. Whether Alcaraz acknowledged it or not, the tension between them had turned this match into something more than just a semi-final. This was personal. As the players returned to the court for the third set, one thing was clear: neither of them was backing down. Their rivalry, built on mutual respect but fueled by undeniable tension, had transformed this into an instant classic. A battle for the ages. A fucking masterpiece in the making.